Hi, welcome. My name's Megan Elliott. I'm the founding director of the Johnny Carson Centre for Emerging Media Arts, and it's my great pleasure to be able to invite and welcome Alexander Hodge to our convening this afternoon. Alexander Hodge is an Australian actor and writer, best known for portraying Andrew on the Emmy Award-winning HBO series Insecure. Born and raised in Sydney, Alexander started acting in school at age 13 after being kicked out of a woodworking class. A competitive rugby player, he began to pursue it as a career, but severely injured his knee during a game when he was 21. After recovering from his injury, Alexander moved to New York to attend the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and he relocated to LA in 2018. Alexander landed the role of Andrew on season 3 of Insecure, created by Issa Rae and Larry Wilmore. Andrew's character was nicknamed Asian Bae by the show's viewers on social media. Alexander's credits include Netflix's Resort to Love and the ABC Disney TV series Epic. He is appearing in the upcoming movie As Sick as They Made Us with Dustin Hoffman. Welcome, Alexander. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, that bio is simply what I've read online. So what juicy bits have I left out that you'd like to share with us?
That's pretty comprehensive. Yeah, I think you've done your homework, so there's not too much to add. I think that Netflix movie Resort to Love comes out next week, I think. Yeah, next week. So if you're bored, got nothing else to do, you can watch it on, I think, Friday. Else? No, that's really about it. So yeah, thank you for that.
Great. Well, Lincoln City Libraries have a One Book, One Lincoln program, and this year they read Charles Yu's Interior Chinatown, the story of an Asian man searching for a leading male role in Hollywood and what it's like about being typecast as Asian guy. So initially the libraries asked me to find a professor to speak about racism and typecasting in the film industry, but I thought it would be much more interesting to hear directly from you, an Asian male performer. So what's it like in Hollywood?
I think Hollywood is first and foremost an industry, it's a business. So, I think as with many businesses that have been around for quite some time, they can sort of lean towards conservatism in terms of commercial approaches to things. So, I know it's everyone comes to Hollywood with big dreams and aspirations, but can sort of get a little lost in the way of the commercialization of making film and television. So I think it's definitely a learning curve, and it is a process. I don't think I've never really seen myself as any kind of I guess, I don't know, some kind of stereotype or anything, but then again, I don't think any of us see ourselves as any kind of stereotype or monolith. There's a lot more nuance to our personalities and our real life characters. So I think I guess the intersection of knowing who you are and then also how people might view you is definitely a learning curve when becoming part of the industry.
Right. So I was watching you I watched a lot of interviews with you on YouTube, actually, and you said that you've been a fan of Insecure even before you had your audition, and that you couldn't believe you got an audition because, and I'm quoting you here, "I never thought there would be a role for an Asian guy on Insecure." Why did you think that? And maybe you might need to tell our audience a bit about Insecure.
Yeah, Insecure, if anybody's seen it, is it's a show that sort of depicts the lives of, centered on two young Black women in South Central LA. And it's, it very much, it's a very authentic portrayal of a very Black experience in LA, which is amazing, which is why I loved it so much, because, it's such an incredible slice of life where, a lot of people sort of talk about Insecure. It's hard to explain it as anything more than kind of like a slice of life. These characters seem so real to people and so vivid that everyone kind of feels that they know somebody like that, or they know the characters themselves. I guess I never saw I never saw an Asian person having a central role in that story. And I think, going back to, the commercialization of art in Hollywood, you you hear terms, they get um, sort of pinned as certain things. Insecure is a Black show, and so you think of it being centric to Black characters and Black experience. And I think once you sort of view it through an industrial sense, you don't really leave room for other sort of identities within that. And so as a fan of the show, I loved it. But as somebody, who works in the industry, I never really thought that there was a place for me in the show. I never thought that there was a part of the story for me to tell, which is, I don't know that that is so much like a detriment, or I don't think it's with this show specifically, I don't think that it's certain, way of looking at things. I don't think that I need to look at every show and go, oh, there's got to be a place for me in that. But there are certain shows where you wonder why there isn't a place for you. You wonder why a show like Girls, that's set in Brooklyn, that runs for 6 or 7 seasons, only has a handful of people of color with speaking roles. That is something that you can question a bit more. But then something like Insecure, it's very representational of a very specific kind of experience. And me not having that experience, not growing up in South Central, not being a part of that community per se, I wouldn't have thought that there was a place for me to tell that kind of story. But, when that opened up, and as I started, once I landed the role, I started to do more research. I learned that there is a huge Asian American presence within specifically Gardena and South Central LA. So, it kind of really made sense after all that there was an Asian character central to the story. So, yeah.
I'm going to take a question actually from Caitlin, who suggested this beforehand. Yeah. Given there is such, and the link to the report in the chat is just showing a report that of the top 1,300 grossing films released from 2007 through 2019, just 44 featured an Asian or Pacific Islander character in a leading role, and only 1/3 of those roles went to a single actor, which was not only Dwayne Johnson, who is not Asian, but who did you see, what role models did you have growing up to want to be an actor and to see yourself on screen?
I think going off the back of that study, I think it's also important to note how many of those came in one film in Crazy Rich Asians. So had that not been there, it probably would have been half that again. But in terms of role models I had growing up, it's funny, I had, when I was a kid, I was around during sort of like Jackie Chan's renaissance. And I love Jackie Chan because that was the guy that I saw that kind of looked like me on screen. And I thought that was amazing. I thought that was really cool. And I really felt a sense of affinity with Jackie Chan. It wasn't until I got a little bit older when people started using Jackie Chan as a slur against me on like the playground and so on. Calling me Jackie Chan is like a racist remark. And that made me want to distance myself from Jackie Chan because I felt slighted by that. I felt it became derogatory to associate with Jackie Chan. And so, kind of, the one person I had was almost in a way kind of, I allowed him to be taken away from me by other people. So I kind of didn't really have anyone. I started studying Bruce Lee, and I thought he was incredible. But I think, I was born and raised in the 90s. I kind of missed the cultural relevance of Bruce Lee's rise. So I kind of got the aftermath, which was cool, but it was never an active consumption of his work, or never an active viewing of him on screen. So I didn't really feel like he was somebody that kind of represented me in a way, because I just wasn't around during his work. there was Jet Li in some amazing movies, Cradle to the Grave, Romeo Must Die, some iconic films. And Jet Li was also somebody I thought was really cool, but he was always, his roles were always very serious and always very, you know, kind of, I don't know, I just never really felt like I had a real affinity with Jet Li stuff, but I did love watching somebody like him in a position of power on screen, because, you know, aside from him and Jackie Chan, and even Jackie Chan with a lot of his humor, a lot of his work, kind of underplays his authority, underplays his strength and power on screen. He's always the Lutzy, the comic relief, in a way where it's funny that he can overcome certain things because he's so unassuming. So there was never any never any kind of I guess overarching like power associated with Jackie Chan. It was quite comedic, but that was his way into the Western film industry, and that's what he did. I think it wasn't until I was in my teens when John Cho came to relevance, and I thought he was incredible. There's a wonderful film called Better Luck Tomorrow where I thought he was the coolest thing in the world. But again, you know, I was kind of older by that point, so I didn't really, and I was no longer investing so much of my identity building or any markers of my foundation of identity in consuming their work. I had already sort of built a lot of my identity by then, so I was consuming it as an adult. But yeah, that's kind of really the only kind of touchstones that I had in terms of people I identified with or looked like me on screen.
That brings up a really prime element of Interior Chinatown, that Willis Wu's idea of peak performance is the Kung Fu guy. So I wonder how, if you could talk a little bit with that in the background, that Willis Wu's idea of winning at this job as being Kung Fu guy, how the description for Andrew from the casting call, how that kind of speaks to moving forward, how we're getting away from that.
In terms of getting away from undermining authority in Asian characters and sort of more nuanced depictions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the casting call for Andrew was Asian guy, was cool, in his early 30s, from Gardena. It was very much like, pardon me, it wasn't like, apart from the specific ethnic breakdown of Asian male, there was nothing else about it that would read as, you know, monolithic or stereotypical Asian portrayal in Hollywood, which I loved. I thought was, you know, true to Insecure. Their sort of legacy now is, you know, developing and portraying characters that are against type and are, you know, more nuanced and better enriched as characters, which I think is why people are drawn to the show. But I remember reading that breakdown and thinking, wow, like this guy kind of like really is me, you know. It was nothing about being a straight A student or accountant or a sidekick or anything like that. It was very much just like this dude who's kind of like laid back and you know, is a love interest to Molly, and it was very much like it was so open but so specific at the same time. You know, as we started filming, we started developing more of the backstory and the character. You know, I found out he worked in music, and I found out that he kind of like was quite mercurial in the way he moved through LA, and I just thought it was really cool. But yeah, I think the most important thing that they wanted in Andrew was somebody who didn't back down easily, somebody that could hold their own against Molly. The way that Yvonne plays Molly is very authoritative, very highly autonomous, and very outspoken, and impassioned in the way that she communicates with people. And they wanted somebody that would be able to hold their own in a scene with her, and to be able to you know, not back down, not be undermined in any way. And I've never seen an Asian person have the opportunity to hold that in TV and film. I've never seen somebody looking for an Asian guy to be strong and to be accommodating and to be comfortable in their skin like that. So I think in terms of, I struggle. I think because I'm attached to the character in myself, I struggle to like use any terms of like revolutionary or new or you know, anything like that. But from my own experience, I can't really recall in mainstream media an Asian guy being given that artistic license and also somebody looking for that in an Asian man. So yeah, I think speaking to your point, I think it does advance things for Asian men specifically.
Oh, I think she's muted.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep the noise of my cat out of the conversation. So how often do you think then that there would never be a role for an Asian guy on that show or in that film?
Often.
So how do you keep going?
I've been fortunate enough to meet some wonderful and like-minded people in this industry that give me hope. To know that they're working actively to improve the state of affairs for Asian representation in the Asian community. You know, I really am hopeful. I've met a handful of people that continue to, you know, workshop and develop and to just commune with, that do make me quite optimistic that more is yet to come. My friends and I, Asian actors, we have a joke in the industry that sort of we can't, and none of us can be on the same show, or else it'll be called an Asian show. We have this joke that if there's 2 or more Asians, it's going to be an Asian show, regardless of the fact that there might only be 2 and 12 of the other people are all any other ethnicity. It's kind of the way that Asians are afforded work in this industry that, you know, there's in a core cast, there's no more than 2 Asians unless it's Fresh Off the Boat, unless it's Kim's Convenience or another, you know, quote unquote Asian show. So we've all resigned ourselves to the fact that we'll never work together, but we can still, you know, be big fans and supporters of each other's work. But I think that is actually changing now. A friend of mine is on a new Amazon series from Gloria Calderon-Kellett called With Love. And there are 2 Asian guys on the show, and they're completely unrelated and with completely different storylines. And that is progress for us, which is sad, but, you know, at least it's happening. You know, I think, I don't know, personally, there's part of me that kind of feels like a bit of a fraud or a bit of a cheater, because, you know, I'm coming into this time in the industry where it's not great for Asians, but it's never been better. We're eclipsing a moment of progress where we are now able to ask for more, hope for more, and demand more in ways that could never happen before. That Sandra Oh, that Gemma Chan, that Steve Yeun couldn't do before us. And now we are sort of, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of those giants and demanding more. We're kind of like the bratty little children that don't know how lucky we are, you know, to have what we have, but we expect more. And, you know, I think that is also what affords me the luxury of expecting more, is knowing that those people survived and those people are now, you know, there are how many for every Sandra Oh, for every Steve Yeun, for every Daniel Day Kim, how many of those couldn't hang around long enough to wait for this moment? You know, we reap the rewards of the seeds that they sowed, and it is it's that gives me hope for more, because, you know, we can't stop. There's got to be more.
Well, it's, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to me that you just mentioned Amazon, because my question was going to be, well, how will streaming impact it? And the kind of billion-dollar war chest for content production that, you know, Netflix, Amazon have. And it's interesting, those three examples where your movie coming up is on Netflix, that's on Amazon, you're on HBO, and then of course another massive streamer. So are you hearing things that they might be doing interesting stuff in other markets, or just having shows that reflect our demographic makeup more often?
Well, I think we're in an interesting moment, you know, because this is a purely industrial question where, you know, this is just about commercial demand. This is, you know, these stories have always been here, but because the avenues for developing and producing and presenting content were quite static in terms of, you know, cable, free-to-air, theatrical release. There was nothing else really that you could do. Now we're in this great rat race for content, as you said, where the industry has come to a point where they have so many avenues for releasing content, and they've realized that there is only so much content going around up until this point. So they've backed themselves into a corner where they're desperate for IP, they're desperate for stories. This book, Interior Chinatown, is being developed right now. They are desperate for more stories, and so now they've been forced to open themselves up to stories they weren't open to before. You know, I wouldn't call this a great moment in Hollywood's, you know, ethnic awakening, that they've realized that there are so many incredible stories from marginalized communities that they need to tell. No, it's just they need more content. They want to make some money. So you know, it's not really a point of like, wow, you know, we're really in a place where we're finally being seen for our worth. No, they just need their money. They need their content to make their money, and that is, unfortunately, still, you know, that's apparent in most of my friends of color who are developing their content, their IP, their books, they're adapting and so on at these networks and studios that are really giving them pushback because they're not open to understanding and realizing the experience of the individual. They want the content. And so what is happening right now behind closed doors is conversations about, you know, how to whiten certain projects, how to bring certain stars, because they're rubbing up against the archaic model of the star vehicle for content. And because of the legacy of the systemic racism, all the stars are largely white because those are the ones that were given the opportunities. And so it's hard for us, if Steve Yeun's working, if Sandra Oh's working, if Daniel Day Kim's working, who else is there? There's no stars. So it has to be given to a white guy because there are no more Asian stars, rather than giving people the opportunity to develop stars again. So that's why I'm sort of, and I can probably sound jaded talking about it, but that's the reality of the conversations that we're facing right now. It's wonderful that we have so many, you know, creators of color that are now being given opportunities and being recognized. You know, Shonda Rhimes is finally being recognized for her worth. She has created over $1 billion in revenue for ABC. So it's only right that Netflix will give her a 9-figure deal to recognize her for her worth. And her first show, Bridgerton, has obviously done what it's done and changed the game for Netflix because she's worth that money. But largely, it's not changing the fight that creators of color still have in getting their visions recognized and realized the way that they want, which would then trickle down and create opportunities for people who look like me in the jobs that I'm in. I'm lucky that Issa Rae was ahead of the curve on that with Insecure on HBO. She, you know, again, there was no real star vehicle in Insecure. That was something that she created herself. She developed herself, and credit to HBO, gave her the opportunity, and now she is a star because of that. So I think, I don't know, trying to loop this all back in together. I think it's still a fight. I think it's still something that we need to, I guess, protect ourselves against and work really hard to realize. But progress really is on the way. It's not quite where we want it to be or where we'd like it to be, but I think we are being able to make the most of what's coming.
Cool. Caitlin?
Yeah, so one of the actually community submitted questions that I found would be particularly informative. Our community is fairly diverse for Nebraska. We're lucky enough to be one of the most friendly cities in the country, and we receive a lot of refugee community members. So we do have some diversity in that way. So fortunate for that, but we are still like 74%, I think, white. So from your experience being raised as a mixed race child in a predominantly white community, what advice do you have for parents in that situation, trying to raise a mixed race child in a predominantly white place?
That's an incredible question. I really think, speaking from my own experience, I wish that my parents' cultures were not quite so preserved, but were shared with me a bit more. I think the great plight of immigrants is, or the great desire of immigration is assimilation. People move to countries for better opportunity, for a better way of life, for peace, and so I think largely the immigrant mentality is to assimilate, is to become one with the society that you are integrating into, which is great and very helpful. And if it's born of, the motivation is born of trauma, it makes sense. But I think acknowledging and celebrating the differences that we have can strengthen us in our identities. And something that I'm working on now in my adulthood is redeveloping a love and a bond with my history and my ancestry. I was just shooting in Ireland for a couple of months, and I really my father's Irish. I had such an incredible journey there, and I was learning so much about my Irish roots and my Irish heritage, and even that I had family in the city that I was shooting in, and I didn't, I've never met them, and so on. And I do the same with my mother's Chinese Singaporean ancestry, where I feel a disconnect, and I'm trying to bridge those gaps again. And it makes me feel more whole as a person, as somebody who grew up and was raised in a society that was separate to my parents' ethnicities and ancestries. My father was born and raised in Sydney, but my mother wasn't. And so I kind of, it felt like the record skipped a little bit on the needle skipped on the record. And so, I'm trying to rediscover what that entire song sounds like, to make a metaphor. I just bought a record player, so that's where that comes from. But yeah, I would say that, that it doesn't have to be out of fear. It doesn't have to be out of preservation or idolatry. I think it can be out of real celebration, of love for who we are and what makes us who we are. I'm a big fan of not treating everybody as one. I hate the term, I don't see color. I hate the terms of I don't treat anybody, any other way. We should be treated individually. We should be seen individually. We should be celebrated individually. I think this idea, this archaic idea of difference is dangerous. That's completely untrue. Otherwise, we would not be eating Thai food on a Friday night and Chinese food on a Wednesday night and pizza on a Sunday night. I think we should celebrate our differences. And I think in terms of raising children in a third culture, we can really embrace the new society that we've entered into, but we can also celebrate where we come from and what makes us whole. So that is a long-winded response to what you said. I've thought about it a lot. because as somebody who is a product of that, and inevitably will raise my children in another culture, I do think about the ways to integrate everything together to create a more whole experience.
I think that was as good an answer as I could have possibly asked for. So the main thrust, I guess, of your work as Andrew in this kind of like, I know you don't want to call it groundbreaking, but this kind of groundbreaking role, and things like Crazy Rich Asians, where we see an entire cast of diverse Asian characters leading diverse Asian lives. What can
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah, please.
The Asian representation wasn't very diverse in that film.
Fair.
It was all extreme. I wouldn't even say upper class. If there's a class above upper class,
fair.
It was all of them.
Fair.
So
fair.
It wasn't very diverse in that sense.
In that way,
yeah.
I guess
it was a cast full of Asians, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
but,
I was thinking more diverse in an Asian American perspective, Singaporean. I believe that there was a character from South Korea, or so, there were a couple of different ethnically different Asians. But you're correct. The economic difference was not that diverse.
Yes.
But how can we as viewers, and like particularly folks that are not part of this minority but see the obvious value in the stories that are being told, how can we help support these more diverse things to fruition?
I think we can veer away from a cancel culture mentality of things being binary, either good or bad. Okay. I think we can look at things as celebrating their success, and also acknowledging that there is more room for more. Acknowledging that Crazy Rich Asians was it was incredible for us. It was artistically, commercially, mainstream, critically a success across the board, which is amazing for us. And we can really celebrate that for what it was, as like a studio rom-com, that it ticked all the boxes and it was great. And it didn't rely on any star power. It didn't rely on anything other than a wonderful story that just happened to be Asian centric. And I think we can also yearn for more. We can yearn for the story of the Filipino kids who grew up in Manila and their high school romance and what that looks like. We can yearn for the Asian kids in San Gabriel Valley in East LA and what it was like for them, in terms of, what depends who hears this. Euphoria was set in San Gabriel Valley, which is overwhelmingly Asian. What Euphoria would really look like if it was truly set in San Gabriel Valley. We can expect more, while also celebrating and lifting up what we have now. I think what we can, and again, I want this to sound as I guess affirming as possible, but sometimes we just need to get out of the way and support others. We need to head to the back of the room and show up, but not be at the front. I say that in terms of like my role as as a supporter of Black Lives Matter, as a feminist, as somebody who advocates for disability visibility, of like knowing that we have a role to play in other people's journeys, but knowing that necessarily we're not at the center of it. And that can be difficult. I know as a man, that is something that I have to learn to see, that it's not all about me. And that as white people can learn to see that it's not all about them per se. We all have to understand the greater role that we play in things. So knowing that we can highly advocate for things, and especially in rooms that we have access to that other people don't. When I have access to a room full of men, say in a locker room or in a gentleman's club, which is crazy to me that they still exist, and things like that, to then speak up and advocate and move to the front of that, but then, you know, learn that that is the role that I play, and that in the greater picture of things, I'm further to the back. I hope this kind of answers how, with your question of, you know, how to support these films and things like that, when you know, not being a part of that community per se. Yeah, I think it really just comes down to analyzing, you know, what your contributions to that plight or that journey can be, what your strengths are in those moments. You know, I think, you know, it's group project stuff. You know, you lean into your strengths. Yeah.
That was perfect. So the kind of the sum up, I want to give people a chance, if any of the public members that are here, if you have any questions that you want to submit, you can throw them in the chat, and then Megan and I will read them out. That way we don't have too much competing noise in the background. But one of the things that Willis Wu talks about in the book is like his resume, things like disgraced son, delivery guy, guy who runs in and gets kicked in the face. Like, these are his characters' titles. So in a perfect world, what would the roles that you would see in the future, how would you describe those kind of characters?
Kumail Nanjiani talks about this. He says that, like, you know, stereotypes aren't all bad. You know, sometimes they're true. You know, like, it's okay to be the Chinese delivery guy, because there are a lot of Chinese. I was a delivery boy for 3 years in New York. You know, like, like some things are true, some things do exist, and that's okay to portray. So I don't so much have an issue for that. I think my issue would be if, you know, in 2030, somebody's career, somebody's resume is still read as that, as exclusively the Chinese delivery guy or the guy who gets kicked in the face. I think a lot of it comes down to status. I think there are incredibly fascinating stories. I'm developing a story about delivery boys, because I think those experiences are fascinating to explore. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it comes down to status. I think it comes down to time on screen, to perspective we're affording these people. I truly believe that everybody has an incredible story to tell. I think everybody who's listening in right now has an incredibly, you know, fascinating story to tell that no one else could tell. I think it comes down to the gaze. I think historically we have viewed everything through the white male gaze. So women on screen, no matter how incredible the character could be, if they are not portrayed in a way that is respectful, that is dignified, because if it's viewed through the wrong gaze, there's no real point to doing it. So I think moving forward, the important thing is the way we're choosing to portray things, the way we're choosing to present things to audiences, for better or worse. Most of us form our opinions around the art that we consume, around the work that we consume. And so I think truly the important thing is diversifying the gaze, the point of view, the director, the studio, the writer, and that will naturally enrich everything else that we will then consume from then on. That's truly what I think. I honestly think the resume, I think that's a moot point. I think that's a trickle down effect. I don't think that's to be effective. You know, I could play Quentin Tarantino's Bruce Lee. How could you find a way to undermine and emasculate such an icon of stoicism, of community, of love, and yet he found a way to do it. And I say that speaking as a staunch fan of Quentin Tarantino's work, but I can still acknowledge that he undermined an Asian icon in the way that he portrayed him, because it was a white male gaze. So that's what that's again, long-winded. That's the answer, was my answer to your question.
Let me check the chat here. Don't see anything there, but we did put that article that the Asian Pacific Islanders in the film industry, we put that article in the chat. So if anybody's interested in those statistics and research, that is there. While we wait for people to feel like they can ask a question, I know another thing, oh, you have Asian Bay. I want to know what it's like to work with Issa Rae. I want to know what it's like to work with Yvonne. And so any tidbits you can share about working with that delightful cast?
I've actually been really lucky that I've gotten to work with a lot of really incredible women in this industry. I've worked with Edie Falco. I've worked with Issa Rae. I've worked with the show, the project I just wrapped was led by a couple of incredible women. I think there is just such a level of empathy and a level of respect that I've experienced in working with women-led projects, where, yeah, compared to the male-led projects, people are given more space. People are given more respect to contribute things. It's more collaborative. It's less a one-person vision and you're just a cog in the machine, and more you're allowed to bring yourself to work. You're allowed to share your thoughts and ideas and to collaborate, which is amazing. I think anyone who's experienced that in their work knows the validation that comes with feeling like you're a part of something rather than just a pawn on the chessboard. So yeah, Issa specifically, as creator, writer, producer, actor, she's a force to be reckoned with, and I love it. I see her on set navigating ways that are just, it's truly inspiring to watch. You know, to be the person who calls all the shots. You know, in TV, the showrunner is usually the person who's in charge. The showrunner is most often a producer, and they're in charge of the story. They're in charge of everything. But our showrunner would even defer to her on set, and it was just such an incredible thing to see, where, you know, she held that job without ego, without pride. It was always just centered on the work and making the best possible product at all times. And it was, I think, as far as role models go, she's definitely a role model for me, in an industrial sense of how I would like to, you know, navigate in industry. And she's definitely, it's beautiful to watch people in that position still treat everybody with dignity from top to bottom. And, you know, when you see people like that do it, there's no excuse for anyone else not to. So I would say that she's really reinforced a sense of humanity in the work that we do, which is great. Yeah. She's also really funny, which is, coming on board to do a comedy with somebody like that, it's the worst because you're never going to be as funny as her. But I learned so much in terms of improv and play, which I take with me on every job I do now. So yeah, it's incredible.
Excellent.
She lives up to the hype.
Okay, good.
That.
Yeah, every interview I've ever seen with her, I'm just like, how can she just be so constantly funny, coming up with wit, you know?
It's incredible.
So I have a question in the chat from Emily Koopman, if you want to unmute yourself, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. One
hey,
thing much for being here. I'm part of the selection committee, so it's really cool to see something that we just thought was so important, and then have discussion about it. And so thanks again. I also just have to say I love Insecure as a single person working in the nonprofit world in my 30s. It's like life. I work with kids, and so I've been hooked since forever, and appreciate
Since we got y'all.
Yeah. So my question is, you're speaking to people who are readers, right? We picked this book. It's kind of formatted like a screenplay, but I think talking to us who just either listen to books or read books in their physical format, what kind of, what are some more, if you have, what am I trying to say?
Like recommendations, yeah.
Lines, yeah, that, if we're not seeing it in films, where else can we find it? Authors, podcasts. I mean, we're just a bunch of learners.
I'm still listening. I am.
That is I've read Issa Rae's book, and I've read Amanda Seales. I'll read them all.
Oh yes, Amanda's book is. Have you read Amanda Gorman's poetry? Oh man, that book was good.
So yeah,
I will. I'm just collecting a couple of things that I have lying around right now, and as soon as I get them, I'm going to come right back and show you. So you just after like any books, whether it's like fiction, nonfiction, and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm just collecting some of my favorites, some of my girlfriend's favorites. I'm ruining the structure of my bookshelf, but it's okay. It's for a good cause. Okay.
Well.
This is a list of. Is this? It's reverse on my screen. I don't know if it's reverse.
It's good for us.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, Children of Blood and Bone is a wonderful Nigerian-American author. She just recently graduated from Harvard. This, speaking of being adapted, is currently being adapted by J.J. Abrams, I believe. But yeah, one of the writers from This Is Us is actually writing the script. But Tomi Adeyemi, you can't really see that. But yeah, she's incredible. This is sort of like, it's like an African version of Harry Potter or Game of Thrones. It's just such an incredible world-building fantasy, and it's censored. It's inspired by African voodoo and magic, which is it's phenomenal. So that's definitely one. This is my favorite author of all time, Haruki Murakami. Magical realism. It's kind of just like these really kind of, I don't know, melancholic love stories, and they're just so incredible. The way his characters are most often, versions of himself. He's a Japanese author, and these are all translated. He has a lot of work that that he writes journals that he doesn't allow to be translated because he doesn't want it to be misconstrued, because it's truly just his musings. But his books are all translated, and I've never picked up one of these books that I haven't loved. I haven't read many Japanese authors, and I think reading things that are so far outside of our scope and our realm can often inspire us, because we didn't know that it could be done that way. Which is, I think, the reason why Parasite did so well, because it's not a Western story structure. It doesn't make sense, really, but at the same time, it made complete sense and kind of revolutionized storytelling. It didn't really exist in a genre. It didn't really exist in a 3-act structure, but it was such a compelling film that it cleaned up. Another Nigerian author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is Americana. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. Again, was being adapted by HBO, I believe. I think all of these books are probably being adapted. But yeah, this is another like love story, again, fiction. Speaking of books like Amanda Seales, Issa, Yvonne Orji has a book as well. She plays Molly on the show, called Bamboozled by Jesus. This is Lovey's book, called Professional Troublemaker. These are more nonfiction. Issa Rae actually has a review on it. But yeah, this is another like kind of like reticent to call it self-help, but it's just like kind of I guess words for life, especially like in a work sense, work related. This guy is fast becoming one of my favorite authors, Viet Thanh Nguyen. This is the sequel to The Sympathizer. I don't know if anybody has read that. Again, being adapted. It is a really sharp, witty, darkly comedic story of a spy during the Vietnam War, and then how he comes to America after the war, and it's basically his kind of like socialist versus capitalist, I guess, musings, and it's a wild journey. This is the sequel, where they go to Paris, and I am making my way through this. He's incredible. This is a book that is nonfiction. This is, let's say this. I'm not going to be able to say it right, but it's a book that everyone should read.
That is one we considered this year, was Cast. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is definitely something that should be, even if it's not a part of a curriculum, which I do think it should be a part of a curriculum, but I think this is a must read for anybody living in America, and probably a lot of people living in a lot of other places in the world. But yeah, it is quite incredible. I'm also making my way through this, but yeah, again, those are, what is that, 6 books by 6 people of color that are all incredible and I love very much. But yeah.
Excellent.
Did that answer anything?
Yeah, I think that was great.
Okay.
So we now have another question from actually another person on the selection committee. Interesting enough. So Jackie, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right. Hi there, I'm Jackie O,
Hey,
and I was
Jackie.
on the selection committee. Hi. And I'm actually a Filipino American, second generation American. And my mom immigrated from the Philippines to Chicago in 72. But I wanted to ask you about intersectionality, and how do you consider or talk about, and how should we consider talk about intersectionality with the AAPI experience? Obviously, there's a stereotype right around AAPI and certain groups within it, but intersectionality adds a really rich and complex nuance to who we are. How do you think and talk about that?
I think it's really important to avoid comparison. I think where a lot of people can get sort of tripped up in intersectionality is comparing experiences and journeys and plights. Different communities have different demands, even though on surface level they might look the same. Because we experience things differently, the way, whether it's the way we move in the world or whether the way we're perceived in the world, or how we identify and align ourselves, comparison is dangerous. Comparison will kind of tear down the house of cards. I think this comes back again to my belief that we should celebrate individuality, that we shouldn't shy away from what makes us different. I think we should embrace what makes us different and cultivate these things. But comparing what anti-Asian hate to Black Lives Matter, it's a futile exercise because we are facing 2 different things. It shouldn't be treated the same, and it almost shouldn't be the same conversation. It should be in the same book, but a different chapter, where I think understanding that we want to help all these things, right? That's the intersectionality of it, where we all want to come together and help. But we need to understand that every community and every plight demands a different thing from us. You know, when you see a scuffle on the street or a domestic argument or any kind of problem that's that you might want to call the police for it. If it's people of color, you should take a second to think about it. If there's anybody else that you can call that isn't going to bring a gun to this situation. I think you know, knowing that certain communities demand certain things, knowing that if you are dealing with you know, non-gender binary community, you know, asking pronouns and so on. I think just understanding, trying to, again, not get tangential, but understanding that different communities that expect different things and not conflating them. Not conflating that, you know, oh, cool, yeah, things are great for the Asian community because, you know, I went to Pride and I saw so many Asian people there. It was just great. You know, it's not that's not sympathetic. That's not quite helpful, I think. So I think I got to use less words. Just understanding the nuance between communities and how your efforts for them should be thoughtful and differing each time and mindful. That's all I needed to say.
That's all right. That's excellent. What a great way to end it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Alexander, for answering our questions and giving us some insight. I know when we decided to choose this book, I was like, oh man, a tall order for me as a middle-class white lady to tackle the topic of racism. How can I do this? And thankfully, Megan was very deft in kind of helping us craft a program we thought would be helpful.
Yeah, so. I think to that point, and I think is important to know before we go, is that not approaching racism with hesitation, not approaching it in a manner of fear of what am I about to do wrong or what. So I think approaching it with a sense of resolve, of let's do something about it, of activity, of if the motivation is active, that can really change the way we deal with racism and even the discourse around racism. You know, I think the fact that you're doing this today is a step in the right direction, and that's something that you can stand on in terms of, you know, moving through the never-ending topic of racism in this industry and in this society. But yeah, so thank you guys for doing this. I think it's a wonderful step in the right direction.
All right. Oh,
thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
All right, we will post this a little bit later on the website. Thank you guys so much for coming. Have a good day.
All right, thank you guys. Take care. Be well. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.